The crystal chandelier of the Grand Astoria ballroom dripped light like frozen tears onto the city's most influential figures. It was the annual Children's Health Foundation Gala, an event of champagne smiles and silent million-dollar handshakes. But for one woman standing half-hidden behind a marble column, the light felt like an interrogation lamp. She clutched her small baby bump through the simple fabric of her dress, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was only there to surprise her husband. But the surprise she was about to learn was entirely hers. Because across the glittering ballroom, her loving husband, David Miller, was wrapping his arm around another woman, his laughter echoing in a way that would shatter her world forever. He thought his pregnant wife was at home sick. He had no idea she was right there, listening to every single word of his betrayal. He also had no idea his simple, unassuming wife was Isabel Moreau, the phantom CEO of AuraSync Technologies, a woman who owned half the city, including the very ground he was standing on. His betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a declaration of war he had no idea he'd just started. Isabel Miller felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ballroom's aggressive air conditioning. She had spent the last 2 years carefully curating a life of simplicity. When she'd met David, she had been exhausted by a world where her net worth entered the room before she did. Men saw Isabel Moreau, the tech prodigy, the ruthless negotiator, the billionaire CEO who had built AuraSync Technologies from a garage startup into a global titan. They didn't see her. So she had taken a sabbatical, hidden her identity, and introduced herself as Isabel, a freelance graphic designer who worked from home. She wore simple clothes, drove a modest car, and rented a charming but not extravagant apartment in a pleasant neighborhood. It was there she met David Miller, a handsome, ambitious project manager at a mid-tier logistics firm called Viridian Dynamics. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to love her for who she was, not what she had. He made her feel normal. He made her feel seen. Their life was a quiet picture of domestic bliss. She'd cook for him, listen to his complaints about his idiot boss and dead-end projects, and offer him unwavering support. When she found out she was pregnant, their joy felt like the final, perfect piece of the life she had always craved. Tonight, she was supposed to be in bed with a wave of morning sickness, but it had passed by afternoon, and she felt a surge of energy. David had been so sweet, insisting she rest while he attended the gala for his company. "It's a boring networking thing, my love," he had said, kissing her forehead. "I just have to show my face. I'd much rather be here with you and our little peanut." Wanting to surprise him to see his face light up, when she appeared unexpectedly, she'd put on a simple navy blue maternity dress, elegant but understated, and driven to the hotel. She slipped in her face, unknown to this glittering crowd, and scanned the room for him. And then she saw him. He was standing near the champagne fountain, looking more dashing than ever in his tuxedo. But he wasn't alone. His arm was draped possessively around the waist of a woman in a shimmering, backless red dress. Isabel recognized her instantly. Jessica Finch, a junior analyst from his team, whom David had mentioned, was aggressively ambitious. Jessica leaned into him, her red-nailed hand stroking his lapel. They looked like a power couple, a perfect match for the opulent surroundings. Isabel's breath hitched. Maybe it's just networking, she told herself, her mind scrambling for a rational explanation. He's being friendly. It's an office thing. But then Jessica laughed, a high tinkling sound, and tilted her head back. David leaned down and kissed her, not a polite peck, but a slow, lingering kiss filled with an intimacy that struck Isabel like a physical blow. The world tilted on its axis. The murmur of the crowd faded into a dull roar in her ears. Rooted to the spot behind the column, she couldn't move. She could only watch and listen as a few of David's colleagues joined them. "You two are brave being so public," a man named Paul chuckled, nudging David. David grinned a smug, self-satisfied expression on his face that Isabel had never seen before. "Why hide it? Life's too short to be stuck in a boring routine." He took a sip of his champagne. "Besides, it's not like my wife would ever show up at a place like this. It's a little too sophisticated for her." A wave of nausea, far worse than any morning sickness, washed over Isabel. Jessica giggled and ran a hand down David's arm. "Don't be mean, Davy. Isabel is sweet, very domestic, probably at home knitting booties or something." The group laughed. The sound was like broken glass in Isabel's ears. "Sweet and boring." David corrected his voice, dripping with condescension. "Honestly, guys, it was a mistake from the start. I needed stability at the time, and she was available. But a man has needs. A man with my ambition needs a partner who can keep up someone with fire like Jess." He squeezed Jessica's hip. "Plus, the pregnancy has made her so dull. All she talks about is doctor's appointments and nursery colours. It's a total passion killer." "So what's the plan?" Paul asked. "You gonna leave her?" David shrugged the picture of casual indifference. "After the baby is born, of course. I'm not a monster. I'll do the right thing, set her up in a little apartment somewhere, pay some child support. She'll be fine. She's not exactly equipped for the real world, bless her heart. But my future," he said, looking at Jessica with adoration, "is with this one. She's my ticket to the top." The cruelty of his words was surgical. Every syllable was designed to diminish her, to reduce their 2 years, and the child she was carrying to a boring routine, a temporary inconvenience he had to manage. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had erased her, belittled her, and pitted her, all while planning her disposal. Tears welled in Isabel's eyes, hot and stinging. But beneath the profound, soul-crushing hurt, something else was stirring. A cold, dormant part of her that she had locked away for 2 years began to awaken. It was the part of her that didn't cry, that didn't break. It was the part that analyzed, strategized, and executed. It was the part of her that was Isabel Moreau. She saw him not as her husband, but as a hostile asset, a liability. He spoke of ambition, of his ticket to the top. He had no idea he was talking to the woman who owned the elevator. Without making a sound, she backed away, melting into the shadows of the grand ballroom. She didn't run. She retreated. Her exit was as silent and unnoticed as her entrance. As she walked out into the cool night air, the tears on her cheeks dried, replaced by an icy resolve. He wanted to discard her. He thought she was simple, unequipped for the real world. He was about to find out just how real her world could be. The game was on, and Isabel Moreau never ever lost. The drive back to the apartment she had shared with David was a blur of streetlights and numb disbelief. The charming 3-bedroom flat that had once felt like a cozy sanctuary now seemed like a movie set, a flimsy facade for a life that was a complete lie. Every photo on the wall of them, smiling on a hike of them, kissing on New Year's Eve, was a testament to her naivety. She walked through the rooms a ghost in her own home. She saw his clothes spilling out of the laundry basket, his favorite mug by the sink, the book he was reading on the nightstand. The life she had cherished was a cage she had built for herself. The simplicity she had craved had been used as a weapon against her. She stood in the middle of the living room, one hand on her belly, the other clenched into a fist. The grief was a physical weight, threatening to crush her. A part of her wanted to collapse, to scream and sob until there was nothing left. But the CEO inside her, the woman who had faced down hostile boards and corporate raiders, refused to let her break. That part of her whispered a cold, hard truth. Grief is a luxury you cannot afford right now. Strategy is your survival. She walked into her home office, a small room David had always referred to as her little hobby space. She sat down at the sleek, minimalist desk and opened her personal laptop, a device far more powerful and encrypted than anything David could imagine. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory taking over. With a few keystrokes, she bypassed the firewalls of her own company, accessing her private executive dashboard. The screen lit up with the glowing logo of AuraSync Technologies, and for the first time in 2 years, Isabel Moreau looked at her empire. Real-time data streams, global asset valuations, project trajectories, and confidential communications flooded the screen. Seeing it all laid out before her was like taking a deep breath of pure oxygen after being submerged for too long. This was who she was. This was her power. Her first call was to the one person who knew the truth about her double life. "Benjamin," she said, her voice steady and devoid of emotion. "Isabel," came the calm, familiar voice of Benjamin Carter, her chief operating officer and her most trusted confidant. "I was surprised to see your secure line active. Is everything all right?" Benjamin was a man in his late 50s, impeccably professional, who had been with her since the beginning. He had strongly, if respectfully, advised against her social experiment. "No, Benjamin, nothing is all right," she said. "The experiment is over. It was a catastrophic failure." There was a pause on the line. Benjamin was too discreet to say, "I told you so, por stas," but she could feel it. "What are your orders?" he asked simply. "I need you to do several things for me with the utmost discretion. First, I want a complete financial workup on David Miller, not just his salary from Viridian Dynamics. I want to know about any personal debts, credit lines, secret accounts, everything. I want to know where every single penny he has is located." "Consider it done," Benjamin replied without hesitation. "Second," Isabel continued, her voice hardening, "the apartment on Crestwood Avenue. I believe the title is held by one of our subsidiary real estate holding companies, correct? Oakview Properties." "That's correct. We acquired the building 4 years ago. You are the sole beneficial owner." "Excellent. I want you to initiate an eviction process for the current tenants of Unit 7B. Use a standard reason. Owner wishes to reclaim property for personal use. I want the notice delivered by a bailiff in exactly 72 hours. 72 hours. Understood. And the tenants are David Miller and me." She said the words, tasting like ash. "But I will have vacated by then." Benjamin was silent for a moment. "Isabel, what happened?" he asked, his professional tone softening with genuine concern. Isabel closed her eyes, the image of David kissing Jessica Finch flashing in her mind. "He's having an affair, Benjamin. He flaunted her at the Astoria Gala tonight. He called me boring and simple. He plans to leave me after our child is born." She relayed the conversation she had overheard, her voice, a monotone recital of facts, stripping the words of their emotional power to prevent herself from breaking down. When she finished, the silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "The man is a fool," Benjamin finally said, his voice laced with a cold fury she had only heard him use when a competitor tried to poach their top engineers. "He is a fool of astronomical proportions. What else do you need? I'm leaving tonight. I'm coming to the city. Have my penthouse at the Apex Tower prepared. Full security detail, but keep it discreet. No one is to know I am back in town. From this moment on, Isabel Miller ceases to exist. I am Isabel Moreau again. The penthouse will be ready in an hour. Your car will be waiting in the underground garage. One last thing, Benjamin. I want you to start compiling a dossier on Viridian Dynamics. I want to know their financial weaknesses, their key contracts, their executive board's pressure points. I want to know everything. I have a sudden interest in their market share. A slow smile could be heard in Benjamin's voice. With pleasure, Miss Moreau. Welcome back. After the call, Isabel moved with quiet efficiency. She packed a single bag with essentials, her laptop chargers, a few changes of comfortable clothes, and a small framed ultrasound picture from her bedside table. She looked at the tiny, grainy image of the life growing inside her. This was no longer just about her own broken heart. It was about securing a future for her child, a future where they would be protected, and where their father would never be able to cause them harm or disappointment. She took one last look around the apartment. She left behind the clothes, the books, the furniture, the entire stage set of her failed life as Isabel Miller. She walked over to the kitchen counter and slipped her wedding and engagement rings off her finger. They felt cold and foreign. She placed them deliberately in the center of the counter, a silent, glittering statement. Then she walked out, closing the door behind her without a sound. She didn't look back. Isabel Miller was gone. Isabel Moreau was driving into the heart of the city, not as a heartbroken wife running away, but as a queen returning to her throne to plot a war. David Miller came home from the gala around 2 a.m., drunk on champagne and success. The night with Jessica had been intoxicating. He felt like the king of the world. He tiptoed into the apartment, expecting to find Isabel asleep. When he saw her side of the bed was empty and neatly made, he felt a brief flicker of annoyance. She was probably sleeping in the guest room again, because his late arrival would have disturbed her. So sensitive. So boring. He didn't even notice the missing suitcase in the closet or the empty space in the medicine cabinet. He collapsed into bed and fell into a dreamless sleep. The next morning, he woke up with a pounding headache and sent Isabel a perfunctory text. "Hey, rough night. Hope you're feeling better. I'm heading to the office. Love you." The lack of a reply didn't register. She was probably busy. His first inkling that something was wrong came at lunchtime. He tried to buy a ridiculously expensive sandwich for himself and Jessica at a trendy deli, hoping to impress her. His corporate credit card was declined. He frowned, running it again. Declined. Flustered, he pulled out his personal American Express. "Card has been suspended, sir," the cashier said with a bored expression. A hot flush of embarrassment crept up his neck as Jessica watched with a raised eyebrow. He paid with his debit card, feeling his anger mount. He called the credit card company from his office. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller," a polite but firm voice informed him, "the primary account holder has frozen the card and removed you as an authorized user." "The primary account holder? That's my wife," David sputtered. "She can't do that without my permission." "Actually, sir, according to our records, Mrs. Isabel Miller is the sole primary holder and is fully within her rights to manage the account as she sees fit." Furious, David tried to call Isabel. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. He sent a flurry of angry texts. "What the hell is going on with the credit cards? Isabel, are you trying to embarrass me? Call me now." They all remained undelivered. It was as if her phone had simply ceased to exist. He stewed for the rest of the day, his grand plans with Jessica feeling slightly less glamorous when he couldn't even buy her lunch properly. When he got home that evening, the apartment felt strangely empty and quiet. He called out her name. No answer. He saw the rings then sitting on the granite countertop, catching the last rays of the afternoon sun. A cold dread heavier than any hangover settled in his stomach. This wasn't just about a credit card. She was gone. Panic mixed with indignation. How dare she? How dare this quiet, simple woman make such a dramatic, disruptive gesture? He searched the apartment, finally noticing the missing clothes had toiletries gone. She had left him. For the next 2 days, David cycled through rage, confusion, and a strange sense of liberation. He told Jessica that Isabel had left him after a fight playing the part of the wronged, misunderstood husband. Jessica, seeing her path to becoming the new Mrs. Miller clearing up, was perfectly sympathetic, her presence a balm to his bruised ego. The real bomb dropped on the 3rd day. David was getting ready for work when a loud, authoritative knock echoed through the apartment. He opened the door to find a stern-looking man in a suit, a bailiff holding a clipboard. "David Miller?" the man asked. "Yes." "I'm here to serve you with this notice." He handed David a thick envelope. David tore it open, his eyes scanning the dense legal text. Words leaped out at him. Eviction notice, 30 days to vacate. Property of Oakview Properties, Inc., reclaimed for owner's use. He stared at the document, his mind refusing to process it. "This is impossible," he stammered. "We have a lease. I pay the rent." "According to our records," the bailiff said, his tone flat. "The rent has been paid in full for the last 2 years from an account belonging to Isabel Miller. An account which has now been closed. The property owner is exercising their right to terminate the tenancy at will. You have 30 days, sir. Good day." The bailiff turned and walked away, leaving David standing in the doorway, the notice trembling in his hand. He stumbled back inside his world spinning. He always thought he paid the rent. The money came from their joint account, but his salary was the primary deposit. He had no idea the apartment itself wasn't just a rental, but owned by some faceless corporation. How did Isabel even find this place? He sank onto the sofa, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying clarity. The suspended credit cards, the closed bank account, the eviction. This wasn't a spontaneous emotional departure. This was calculated. It was methodical. This was retaliation. But for what, the affair? How could she possibly know he had been so careful? A sick feeling rose in his throat as he thought back to the gala. Could she have been there? No, impossible. She was at home sick, wasn't she? He tried to access their joint savings account online. Access denied. He checked the balance. It was 0. Drained. Every penny they had saved, or rather every penny she had contributed from her freelance design work, was gone. He was left with only the modest amount in his personal checking account, enough to cover maybe 1 month's expenses. The squeeze was on. In the span of 72 hours, David Miller had gone from a man on top of the world to a man with no credit, no savings, and a 30-day eviction notice. The comfortable life he had taken for granted had been systematically dismantled, and he was left standing in the rubble, utterly bewildered. The sweet, domestic, simple little wife he had planned on discarding had just shown him a side of her he never knew existed. And the terrifying part was, he had a feeling she was just getting started. From her penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Isabel Morrow operated with the precision of a surgeon. The sprawling, sterile space, all glass and chrome, was a far cry from the cozy apartment she had shared with David. It was her command center. A massive screen on one wall displayed stock tickers, encrypted communications, and the dossier on Viridian Dynamics, which was growing thicker by the hour. Benjamin Carter sat opposite her at a large glass table, his expression grim. "The financial squeeze is effective," he reported. "Miller is attempting to open new lines of credit. but his debt-to-income ratio without your assets is abysmal. He's being denied." "Good," Isabel said, taking a sip of chamomile tea. She had to be mindful of the baby. Her vengeance would be cold and clean, fueled by intellect, not volatile rage. "What's the status on Viridian?" "They are exactly as we suspected," Benjamin said, pointing to a flowchart on the screen. "Over-leveraged and desperate to land a major contract to appease their shareholders. Their entire Q4 projection hinges on acquiring the logistics contract for the new Helios project." Isabel's lips curved into a faint, predatory smile. The Helios project was a massive, multi-billion-dollar international tech initiative, and the lead partner on the project was AuraSync Technologies. Viridian Dynamics was just a small fish hoping to feed on the scraps. "And David's role?" she asked. "He's the project manager for Viridian's bid," Benjamin confirmed. "According to our intel, he's cut corners significantly on safety and insurance protocols to bring their bid in at a suicidally low price. He's banking everything on us not looking too closely at the fine print." "He's banking on me being simple," Isabel murmured to herself. "He's about to learn how closely I look at everything." The next week was hell for David. The pressure at work was immense. His boss, a perpetually stressed man named Robert, was breathing down his neck about the Helios bid. Meanwhile, his personal life was in shambles. He and Jessica were frantically searching for a new apartment, but with his frozen finances and her meager salary, their options were bleak and depressing. Their passionate affair was quickly souring under the weight of real-world stress. "I don't understand why you can't just fix this." "David," Jessica whined one evening, scrolling through grim apartment listings on her phone. "Why was everything in her name? It's like you owned nothing." "I thought we owned it together." He snapped, his patience worn thin. "I had no idea she was so manipulative, so controlling." He had successfully painted himself as the victim, and Jessica, for now, was buying it. The day of the final bid presentation arrived. This was David's chance to turn everything around. Landing the Helios contract would make him a hero at Viridian. It would mean a huge bonus, a promotion enough to escape this financial nightmare and start his new life with Jessica properly. He and his team sat in the sterile, intimidatingly large boardroom at the AuraSync Tower, a building so modern and powerful it made his own office look like a relic. They were presenting to the project's oversight committee. David had practiced his pitch for weeks. He was confident, smooth, and utterly unprepared for what was about to happen. The presentation went well. He laid out Viridian's proposal, highlighting their competitive pricing and aggressive timeline. The committee members listened, their faces unreadable. When he finished, a calm voice spoke from the head of the table. It was Benjamin Carter, COO of AuraSync. "Thank you, Mr. Miller," Benjamin said, his eyes cold. "An ambitious proposal. However, we have some concerns." He gestured to a large screen which lit up with excerpts from David's own bid. "On page 47, you outline your insurance coverage. Our risk assessment team has flagged this as being woefully inadequate for a project of this scale. In fact, it barely meets the minimum legal requirement." Was this an oversight? David felt a prickle of sweat on his brow. "It's a preliminary figure designed to keep the initial bid competitive. We planned to renegotiate once the contract was awarded." "So you submitted a fraudulent bid?" Benjamin stated not as a question, but as a fact. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "I would not call it fraudulent," David began. "Furthermore," Benjamin continued, ignoring him and bringing up another document, "your proposed supply chain relies on parts from a manufacturer that was recently cited for extensive labor violations, something a routine due diligence check would have revealed. Orasync has a zero-tolerance policy for such associations. Did you perform due diligence? Mr. Miller. David's throat was dry. He had outsourced the due diligence to a junior analyst to save time. Jessica. He shot a panicked look at her, but she was staring at her hands, avoiding his gaze. And finally, Benjamin said, delivering the killing blow, your timeline. It's aggressive because you've budgeted for only a single quality control check at the final stage of production. For the Helios project, we require a minimum of 3 at every stage. Your proposal doesn't just cut corners, it saws the legs off the table and hopes no one notices. Benjamin Carter leaned forward. This bid is not just unprofessional, Mr. Miller. It is reckless and dangerously incompetent. It exposes this project to unacceptable levels of financial and ethical risk. We are not only rejecting Viridian's bid, but we will also be formally communicating our concerns about your team's professional standards to your CEO. The words hit David like a freight train. He was humiliated, exposed. He looked at his team. They were staring at him with a mixture of shock and contempt. He had failed, and he had taken them all down with him. The dismissal was swift and brutal. An hour after returning to the Viridian offices, David was summoned to his boss's office. Robert, his face pale with fury, was on the phone with Orasync's legal department. I understand, Robert was saying, his voice strained. Yes, of course. We take this very seriously. Thank you. He slammed the phone down and glared at David. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've not only lost us the biggest contract of the decade, you have made this company a laughingstock. Orasync is threatening to blacklist us from all future tenders. Pack your desk. You're fired. And so is Finch. I want you both out of this building in 10 minutes. David stood there speechless. In a single afternoon, his career, the one thing he had prized above all else, had been utterly annihilated. As he walked back to his desk in a daze, he caught Jessica's eye across the office. Her face was a mask of cold fury and terror. The ticket to the top he had promised her had just become a one-way ticket to the unemployment line. He didn't know how, but he knew with a sickening certainty that this was her doing. The simple, boring wife he had mocked was somehow behind this. She had not only taken his home and his money, but she had reached into the heart of his professional life and crushed it with terrifying, invisible force. Losing his job was the beginning of a freefall. The professional humiliation was absolute, but the practical consequences were even more dire. Without an income, David was toxic. The severance package from Viridian was insultingly small, a clear message for him to go away quietly. The eviction date loomed a ticking clock counting down to homelessness. The relationship with Jessica disintegrated almost immediately. The passion that had been fueled by secret rendezvous and the thrill of the forbidden could not survive the harsh reality of failure and poverty. This is all your fault, she shrieked at him in the half-packed, chaotic apartment. You promised me a future. You said you were a man on the rise. You're nothing, David. You're a failure who got us both fired. My fault, he yelled back, his voice hoarse with stress. You were the one who was supposed to vet the suppliers for the Helios bid. You were so busy planning what you'd buy with the bonus that you didn't even do your job. Their arguments became a daily ritual, vicious and circular. The fire he had admired in her was now a raging inferno directed entirely at him. She saw him not as her partner, but as the anchor that had dragged her down. Within a week, she was gone. She packed her bags while he was out, desperately and fruitlessly dropping off resumes. He came home to find a note on the kitchen counter, next to where his wedding rings had once sat. I can't do this, David. I have to look out for myself. Goodbye. She had taken what little cash he had left in a drawer and vanished. He was truly alone. His world had shrunk to the four walls of the rapidly emptying apartment. His so-called friends, the colleagues and social climbers he had tried so hard to impress, suddenly stopped answering his calls. News of his spectacular flameout at Aura Sink and his unceremonious firing had spread like wildfire. He was a pariah. Desperation began to set in. He swallowed his pride and called his parents, confessing a heavily edited version of his situation, a sudden downsizing at work, a mutual split with Isabel. They offered sympathy and a small loan to tide him over, but the shame was a bitter pill to swallow. Meanwhile, Isabel watched the unraveling from a distance. Benjamin provided daily updates, concise and factual. Miller's co-conspirator has abandoned him. He is attempting to secure a personal loan, but has been unsuccessful. He has contacted a low-grade employment agency. Isabel felt a grim satisfaction, but it was not joy. It was the cold, clean feeling of a problem being systematically solved. Her focus was shifting. Her pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and she was pouring her renewed energy back into her company. She attended board meetings via secure video link, her face and identity still a closely guarded secret from the public. Her mind, sharpened by her personal crisis, was clearer than ever. She made a series of bold, brilliant decisions that sent Aura Sink's stock soaring. One evening, Benjamin brought her a file. "There's one more loose end," he said, his tone serious. "The gala." Inside the file were high-resolution photos. A private investigator had captured crystal-clear images of David and Jessica from that night, laughing, touching, kissing by the champagne fountain. There were also meticulously compiled social media posts from Jessica's accounts, boasting about her new man and their amazing future, all posted while David was still married. "A society columnist for the Financial Times owes me a favor," Benjamin said quietly. "She specializes in features on the city's business elite. A story about a rising star's spectacular fall from grace, complete with a sordid affair with a subordinate and the betrayal of his pregnant wife. It's a story she would find irresistible." Isabel looked at the photos. She saw David's smug face and felt a flicker of the old pain. But it was distant now, like an echo. This wasn't about hurting him anymore. It was about controlling the narrative. It was about ensuring that when the time came, everyone would know the truth. David hadn't just failed. He had been a villain. "Leak it," she said, her voice firm. "But frame it carefully. The wife should be portrayed as a private, dignified victim. No name, just the pregnant wife. I don't want my identity tied to this squalor. I want him to be defined by his actions, not by who he did them to." "Understood," Benjamin said. "It will be his professional and social obituary." The article came out 2 days later. It was a masterpiece of character assassination, all presented as objective journalism. It detailed David's reckless professional conduct and his ethically questionable relationship with Jessica Finch, painting a damning picture of a man whose ambition vastly outstripped his talent and his morals. It mentioned his quiet, pregnant wife, whom he had so callously betrayed. The fallout was immediate. Whatever sliver of professional reputation David had left was incinerated. Any potential employer who Googled his name would now find this sordid tale on the front page of the search results. He was not just unemployed, he was unemployable. David read the article on his phone, sitting on the floor of his now completely empty apartment. The movers had taken the last of the furniture that morning. He had nowhere to go. He felt a despair so profound it was suffocating. The article was the final nail in his coffin. He finally understood. This was not a series of unfortunate events. This was a demolition. It was a planned, sophisticated, and utterly ruthless campaign against him. And it was all orchestrated by the woman he had dismissed as simple, sweet, and boring. He had profoundly, epically underestimated Isabel. The question was no longer what had he done to her. The question was, what was he going to do now? In his desperation, a single foolish thought took root. He had to find her. He had to see her, to appeal to her. He had to remind her of the man she once loved, the father of her child. It was his only hope. He didn't know where she was, but he had to try. He believed with the last shred of his deluded ego that he could still manipulate his way back into her good graces. He had to make her stop. Finding Isabel was impossible. Her phone was disconnected, her email bounced back, and she had no social media presence. She had vanished. David, now living in a bleak, pay-by-the-week motel room, spent his days sending feelers out to anyone who had ever known them as a couple. His inquiries were met with silence. It was as if she had been erased from existence. His desperation led him to a desperate last-ditch idea: Aura Sync. The name had been a constant in his downfall. They had rejected his bid, reported him to his CEO, and somehow he felt were connected to the gossip column that ruined him. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. He reasoned that Isabel, with her freelance, graphic design work, might have had some connection, however tenuous, to the city's tech world. He went to the Aura Sync Tower, the gleaming monument to his failure. He didn't have a plan, just a wild hope that he could talk his way into finding some information. Dressed in his last clean suit, he approached the main reception desk. "I need to speak with someone in your contracting department," he said, trying to sound professional. "My name is David Miller. It's regarding the Helios project." The receptionist, a coolly efficient woman, typed his name into her system. A small red flag popped up on her screen, unseen by David. "One moment, sir." She spoke quietly into her headset. A few seconds later, she looked up at him. "Mr. Carter will see you. Please take the elevator to the 80th floor." David was stunned. Mr. Carter, the COO. Why would the COO agree to see him? A flicker of hope ignited within him. Maybe this was a chance to apologize, to plead his case, to somehow salvage his career. The elevator ride to the 80th floor was silent and swift. The doors opened directly into a vast minimalist reception area outside the executive suites. The air was rarefied, the silence profound. Benjamin Carter was waiting for him. "Mr. Miller," Benjamin said, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming. We have some final paperwork regarding the Viridian bid that requires your attention. Follow me." He led David not to an office, but to a massive boardroom. The room was dominated by a colossal mahogany table and a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a godlike view of the entire city. The men and women already seated around the table were impeccably dressed and radiated an aura of immense power. These were the senior executives of Aura Sync Technologies. David felt his stomach clench with anxiety. This wasn't about paperwork. It was an execution. "Please have a seat," Benjamin said, gesturing to a single empty chair at the end of the table, directly facing the head. David sat his hands, sweating. He felt like a prisoner in the dock. The executives stared at him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "As you know," Benjamin began, standing at the head of the table, "Aura Sync was deeply disappointed by the professional conduct of your team at Viridian. Your actions constituted a serious breach of trust and ethics. Before we close this matter, our board had a few final questions." David swallowed hard, trying to form a coherent sentence, but his mind was blank with terror. Just then, the main doors to the boardroom opened with a soft hiss. A woman walked in. She was dressed in a tailored dark grey power suit that accentuated her confident posture and her now very prominent baby bump. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, elegant chignon. Her face was the same, yet entirely different. The soft, gentle features he knew were now imbued with an unshakable confidence and an icy authority. She walked with a purpose and power that commanded the absolute silent attention of everyone in the room. The executives all rose to their feet in a gesture of profound respect. "Ms. Moreau." Benjamin said, his voice filled with deference as he pulled out the chair at the head of the table for her. David stared, his brain short-circuiting. Moreau. The name echoed in his mind, a name whispered in business circles with a mixture of awe and fear. Moreau was the phantom CEO of AuraSync, the brilliant, reclusive genius who had built the company from nothing. No one had ever seen her. There were no public photos. But he was seeing her now, and she was Isabel, his wife. She sat down, her cool grey eyes locking onto his. The gentle, loving gaze he remembered was gone, replaced by the dispassionate look of a predator assessing its prey. "Hello, David," Isabel Moreau said, her voice echoing in the cavernous silence of the boardroom. It was her voice, but it held a resonance of power he had never heard before. David's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion and terror. The freelance designer, the simple domestic wife, the woman he pitied. It was all a lie, a comprehensive, masterful deception. "I believe you are familiar with my work," she continued, gesturing vaguely to the room. "This is AuraSync, my company. The Helios project is my project. The building you stand in is my building. The apartment you were evicted from, I own that too." She let the words hang in the air, each one a hammer blow against his shattered reality. "You told your friends I was simple," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "That I was not equipped for the real world. You spoke of ambition, of needing a partner who could keep up. You wanted a ticket to the top." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze pinning him to his chair. "David, you were sleeping next to the top. You just weren't smart enough to realize it." A choked, strangled sound escaped his lips. The room was spinning. "You worried about passion killers?" She went on, her voice devoid of any emotion except a chilling finality. "Let me tell you what truly kills passion. It's not a conversation about the color of a nursery. It is contempt. It is betrayal. It is the profound disrespect of a man who mocks the mother of his child behind her back while he plans to discard her like a piece of garbage." She stood up, and the entire board remained seated, their eyes fixed on her. She walked slowly around the table until she stood directly behind him. He could feel the warmth of her presence, a terrifying parody of their former intimacy. "You wanted to know why your life fell apart," she whispered, her voice right next to his ear. "It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a corporate matter. It was me. I took your credit. I took your home. I took your career. And I took your reputation. I did it all without raising my voice, without sending a single angry text. I did it with a few phone calls from the hobby room you so generously allowed me." She walked back to the head of the table. "This is the real world, David. And in this world, actions have consequences. You have no money, no career, and no future in this city. You are nothing." She placed a hand on her stomach. "As for this child," she said, her voice softening for a moment, before hardening again into pure steel, "you will have no part in his or her life. You will not see them. You will not know them. My lawyers will be in touch regarding the formal termination of your parental rights, which I expect you to sign without contest. You are not a father. You are just a lesson my child will learn about one day." She looked at Benjamin. "Benjamin, please have security escort Mr. Miller out of my building. He is no longer welcome here." David finally found his voice, a pathetic, broken croak. "Isabel, please. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I love you." Isabel Moreau looked at him one last time, and for a fleeting second he saw a flicker of the woman he had married, a flicker of pain and loss. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the implacable resolve of a queen. "No, David," she said with absolute certainty. "You don't love me. You loved what you thought was my weakness. And my name," she added, turning her back on him, "is Miss Moreau." Security guards appeared at his side, gently but firmly lifting him from the chair. As they escorted him from the room, the last thing he saw was the back of his wife, the powerful CEO, looking out over the city she owned, without a single glance in his direction. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had been utterly and completely erased. The months that followed the unveiling were a period of quiet, focused reconstruction for Isabel. The storm had passed, the war was won, and now it was time to build the peace. David Miller faded into obscurity. Stripped of his name, his career, and his dignity, he left the city. Rumor had it he went back to his hometown, working a menial job, a ghost of the ambitious man he once pretended to be. He signed away his parental rights without a fight. He knew he had no other choice. He was a non-entity, a footnote in a story that was no longer about him. Jessica Finch suffered a similar fate, unable to find work in her field, her name forever tainted by the scandal. Isabel, however, flourished. Embracing her identity as Isabel Moreau, once more she came out of her self-imposed public exile. The business world was stunned by the revelation of the face behind AuraSync. She gave one and only one interview to the Financial Times, the same publication that had printed David's social obituary. She didn't mention her marriage or David. Instead, she spoke with brilliance and passion about the future of technology, about ethical corporate governance, and about her vision for AuraSync. She announced a new philanthropic endeavor, born from the ashes of her personal pain. The Moreau Foundation for Single Parents. A charity dedicated to providing financial, educational, and emotional support to single mothers and fathers, giving them the resources to build secure futures for their children. She became an icon, not just for her business acumen, but for her quiet strength. She was the woman who had built an empire in secret, a testament to the power of underestimated women everywhere. 2 months later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl whom she named Sophia. Holding her daughter in the quiet of the hospital room, looking into her tiny, trusting face, Isabel felt a sense of peace that vengeance had never provided. The revenge had been a necessary act of cleansing, of reclaiming her power and protecting her future. It was the closing of a painful chapter. But Sophia was the beginning of a new book, one filled with hope and unconditional love. Her life was no longer divided. She was both a mother and a CEO. She would bring Sophia to the office, the baby sleeping soundly in a bassinet in the corner of her sprawling office as she chaired board meetings. She would negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals on the phone while rocking her daughter with her foot. She proved that a woman's power was not a zero-sum game. Her strength as a mother fueled her wisdom as a leader, and her decisiveness in business made her a fiercely protective parent. Benjamin Carter became a doting grandfatherly figure to Sophia, often seen bouncing the baby on his knee while discussing quarterly projections with Isabel. The cold, sterile penthouse was transformed into a warm, loving home, filled with laughter and baby toys alongside stock reports. Isabel had sought simplicity and found betrayal. She had been forced to reclaim her power, and in doing so, found a new, more authentic version of herself. She learned that she didn't need to hide one part of her identity to nurture another. She could be Isabel Moreau, the titan of industry, and she could be Isabel Sophia's mother. They were one and the same. Looking out the vast window of her office one evening, with Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms, Isabel Moreau surveyed the glittering city lights. It was her kingdom. But her empire was no longer just the glass and steel towers of Aura Sink. It was the small, warm weight in her arms, the steady beat of her daughter's heart against her own. She had faced the ultimate betrayal, and had not only survived, but had built a better, stronger world from the ruins. And in that new world, she and her daughter were safe, they were powerful, and they were free. And that is the incredible story of Isabel Moreau. It's a story about the devastating pain of betrayal, but more importantly, it's a powerful reminder that a person's worth is never determined by someone else's opinion. David saw a simple, boring wife, but he was blind to the queen standing right in front of him. Isabel's journey teaches us that our greatest strength often lies hidden, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It's about taking back control, not just for the sake of revenge, but for the sake of reclaiming your own story and building a future on your own terms. What did you think of Isabel's methods? Was her revenge justified, or did she go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these complex stories. If this story of empowerment, justice, and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of real-life drama and incredible resilience. Thank you for listening.